Toga went from a serial killer schoolgirl to a villain with the power to destroy an entire country in 5 minutes. These are the 6 stages of Himiko Toga. Toga Stage 1. When Toga was young, her blood-sucking quirk, transform, manifested as an unusual fixation on blood, which disturbed her parents. Despite doing everything in their power to force their daughter to be normal, Toga's parents ultimately failed. For a while, Toga was able to keep up with their demands, but it all came crashing down in middle school when she saw some of her classmates fighting. The sight of one particular classmate covered in blood was too much for Toga, who later attacked the same boy with a box cutter and drank his blood. You can just imagine how that incident ended. Toga went into hiding. Her parents publicly declared her a demon and disowned her, and it was suspected that Toga may have killed multiple other people in order to drink their blood. Cast out of her home, and now with a pretty impressive rap sheet of suspected crimes, she became a fugitive. Even as a middle school dropout whose motivations were no more complex and wanted to drink some tasty blood, Toga had already started down the shadowy path of villainy. But there's a much better path ahead that'll hopefully lead you to subscribe to Plot Armor with notifications on. Toga Stage 2. Even at that point, Toga was still a kid. Her moral compass may not have been in working order, but she didn't have an agenda or an ideology. She was pretty much purely acting on instinct, courtesy of her bloodthirsty quirk. So what took Toga from a fugitive to a full-fledged villain? Well, a lot of things, but one of the big ones was finding the right friends. A few years after fleeing her home, we can see a few big changes in Toga. The first is that it seems like she's much more comfortable with her abnormal behaviors, no longer trying to repress them, and she's also found a role model in the hero killer Stain. And she's got an agenda now. She wants to make a world that will let her live as she pleases. But perhaps the biggest of all is that Toga begins trying to join the League of Villains. And while we all know she eventually succeeds, it's worth noting that Toga doesn't find immediate acceptance, even in a group of outcasts. She's been plagued by the inability to fit in her entire life. And even when she finds a group of people who have all been similarly rejected by society, they immediately ask if she's insane. Ouch. Still though, that doesn't drive Toga away, and she becomes a member of the League. As one of their members, she gets to be there when the League attacks UA's summer training camp. It's there that she runs into UA students Ochako Uraraka and Suyu Asui, and declares them both to be her new friends, despite slicing open Ochako's arm and picking a fight that doesn't really turn out in her favor when other students arrive for backup. But she does get one thing out of it, a new crush. While fleeing, Toga takes note of Izuku Midoriya, and in typical Toga fashion, it's love at first sight. And this sets a pretty important precedent for Toga. See, Toga's never been a long game kind of girl. Sure, she has an ideology she wants to work for. She tells the League as much when she joins. But she's not using villainy as activism like Stain or working with a long-term plan like Dabi. Freedom from social expectations is her MO, so Toga's actions are largely driven by her emotions, which is exactly what makes her transformation at Stage 5 so terrifying. Toga Stage 3. While she doesn't gain their trust easily at first, Toga finds her place in the world with the League's disturbingly dysfunctional version of a found family. And she proves to be a pretty loyal friend. When the Shie Hasaikai Yakuza group kills League member Magne, Toga and her close friend Twice are determined to avenge her death. Toga's not the type to do anything out of a sense of duty, so I would guess that the desire to avenge Magne means that Toga genuinely cared about her. And when Mr. Compress is injured in the same fight, she worries about his condition too, which is a lot more notable when you think about the fact that seeing someone injured usually gets Toga, a little excited. A girl who likes seeing people beaten and bloody seems unlikely to worry about an injured colleague, and yet here she is. You might be thinking that this sounds anything but villainous, so why talk about it in relation to Toga's journey as an antagonist? Well, that friendship and sense of belonging make Toga a lot more willing to do villainous things. She might not be inclined to fight for anyone's goals but her own, but the more she comes to care for her friends, the more the League's interests align with her own. She's a lot more willing to do their diabolical bidding in light of that. We see this when even though she hates the Yakuza, Toga lets Shigaraki hand her over to the Shie Hasaikai to cement an alliance. She's completely against it, but Shigaraki telling her that the League of Villains needs her to do this in order to keep peace with the Shie Hasaikai is enough to sway her. The League makes her happy, she says, so in order to protect it, she's willing to fight for the Yakuza, no matter what vile deeds they might ask of her. And even though she does fight with them when their hideout is raided by heroes, it's not out of loyalty at all. In fact, when she gets a chance, Toga decides to give the heroes a chance to defeat one of the Shie Hasaikai's top dogs. Playing her enemies off of each other is a pretty bold, coordinated, and strategic move. And she takes it even further when she uses a sample of Izuku's blood that she'd taken from him earlier to shapeshift into him, leading a group of heroes in an attempt to defeat the Shiei Hasaikai. And while she's not solely responsible for the disbandment, as the real Izuku is the one who takes down their leader, this strategic thinking shows a new side of Toga that we had never seen before. Driven by her bonds in the League of Villains and her hatred of her enemies in the Yakuza, Toga finally begins to not only act, but think like a villain too. Toga Stage 4. However, the Shiei Hasaikai fight was sort of a one-off. While it showed that Toga is capable of thinking strategically for the villain's best interests, she still isn't the type to do that when she doesn't have a really compelling reason to. Basically, Toga is at her most outwardly villainous when she has a clear and specific enemy. So what keeps her going when she doesn't? Well, this is where all that love stuff comes in. See, Toga has the belief that loving someone means becoming them. Maybe that's tied to her quirk, which lets her take on the appearance of anyone whose blood she drinks. Even if it's not though, the belief fills her with a desire to become one with the people she loves. At that point, Izuku and Ochako. Granted, it isn't her only goal, since we already know about her dream of living in a world that doesn't discriminate her no matter what she does. Even so, it's big, especially because it is so ethically questionable. Literally wanting to become someone is not only creepy, but also strips the people Toga loves of any agency or individuality. Toga's love lacks mutuality to the degree that her crushes are not so much objects of desire as they are targets, which when combined with her raging infatuation with them is seriously creepy. It's when Toga starts talking about love that we realize her scariest quality isn't her deadliness in battle or even her frightening quirk, but her total lack of boundaries. Villainy isn't often associated with a blurring of emotional lines. She spent the whole series basing more and more of her decisions on her personal desires without regard for the consequences until she doesn't really think that anything is off limits anymore. And her idea of love reflects this shift very well. At the training camp, the thought of talking about crushes with other girls her age excited her, which if you strip away the context is pretty innocent. But as she's lost more and more of her moral inhibitions, that excitement has turned into something a lot darker. Toga has never been adverse to doing illegal or harmful things to get what she wants, but this feels like a pretty big escalation in how far she's willing to go. And it's not long before we see that firsthand. During the rebuilding of the Paranormal Liberation Front, Toga is approached by one of the movement's leaders, a reporter named Chitose Kizuki, better known as Curious. In the interest of her movement, Curious wants to write an article about the murders Toga allegedly committed and how she went insane. This, understandably, doesn't go over too well. Still, Curious isn't backing down, so she and her fellow front members attack Toga. But even then, she hasn't given up on her article, and she proceeds to ask Toga a lot of the same questions we're asking now. Why would a seemingly normal girl abandon her old life, commit gruesome crimes, and become a fugitive? What had to change in her mental state for that to happen? All good questions to be honest, but Toga is having none of it. She manages to use a blood sample to transform into Ochako at the last possible moment, and realizes that her quirk has leveled up. She can now use the quirks of people she transforms into. And with that, she has all she needs to win. With a single touch, she is able to float Curious and her army into the air, then drop them to their deaths. Brutal. But even being given the ability to commit mass murder doesn't faze Toga. Grievously injured, she nonetheless concludes the fight thrilled that she was able to get closer to Ochako, one of several objects of her infatuation that she ever has before. There's a lot to unpack here. For one, name a clearer sign that there's no going back for Toga than remorseless mass murder. She herself says the primary thing she felt in that moment was love, the satisfaction she got from transforming into her crush. She takes out a whole squad of people who are technically supposed to be her allies and seems to react primarily with excitement. Toga was in a fight that was massively stacked against her. Even a hero might have done what she did in a panic with Ochako's quirk. Yes, that is absolutely a factor, and I don't think we can ascribe that to her being especially evil. What's much more interesting and salient is not that she kills all those people, but that killing means so little to her that her primary thought upon doing so is that she's glad she got to do it in a way that made her feel close to Ochako. If Toga ever had any reservations about hurting others, it's safe to say that they're gone now. But that's not to say that Toga doesn't take death seriously, because as we're about to see, when the victim is someone she truly cares about, she's going to raise hell. Toga Stage 5. Toga is, at least ostensibly, full of love for Ochako, Izuku, and for her friends in the League of Villains. However, while some of her loves boil down to creepy infatuation, others seem to be based on a genuine rapport. and no one fits that description better than Twice. The two have always been shown to get along, and later that friendship grew into a strong bond. Seeing Toga on the brink of death even motivated Twice to take control of his quirk. Every step of the way, Toga and Twice have been looking out for each other, and that's how the relationship turns from touching to tragic. Since Twice's quirk has the potential to be so dangerous, he is one of the first known victims of the Paranormal Liberation War, and his last double melts in a devastated Toga's arms. She is infuriated, disguises herself as a hero, and then goes on a rampage. In the moments following her friend's death, all she can think about is getting revenge on the people who she thinks have taken everything from her. And while she doesn't get to finish off her rage stampede, it fuels her determination to take down the heroes at all costs. She can't understand why people who claim to want to save others would kill Twice. And her lifelong hatred of heroes and the society they protect has only grown. But she hasn't totally lost her trust in all heroes just yet. And because of her feelings for Ochako, she chases her down and engages her in a fight so that she can ask an all-important question. Would she ever kill her? Ochako doesn't answer that, but she does tell Toga that if living the life she wants causes harm to others, she has to take responsibility for that. The answer greatly upsets Toga, who is deeply hurt by the condemnation of her way of life by someone she desperately wants to like her, and she flees the scene. Ochako's answer only confirmed what she already believed. That heroes, even the ones she wanted to believe in, don't care about people like her. That society will always continue to discriminate, that there isn't anything left to hold her back. Toga Stage 6. Sometime after the war ends, Toga and Dabi visit her parents' old house, which is now abandoned and vandalized. This gives her a chance to reflect on the past. But with her views now so warped by years of total indulgence of her most violent whims, she's not really thinking too clearly. The visit helps to convince her that the world will never have a place for her in it, and she lets Dabi burn the place down, calling it an act of kindness. Toga has now literally destroyed the last physical reminder of the person she was before she turned to a life of crime. She also rejected her romantic feelings after Ochako's answer to her question during the war arc, and she does so again when Izuku doesn't react to a love confession the way she had hoped. All of the things that kept Toga grounded in the world outside of the League of Villains are gone now, leaving her with pretty much nothing but her villain career to think of. While it's been a bit of a subtle shift, Toga's thoughts and behavior have gradually become more extreme over the course of the series, and now it seems like they've peaked. Even the people she claims so fervently to love are now nothing to her because they oppose her desire to live a life free of limitations. Clearly, when it comes to Toga, no one is safe from her heel turn changes of heart. She's not really stable, and now she's out for revenge too. Last we saw Toga, she had just made a surprise appearance at the ruins of the Gunga Mountain Villa, where she's come to kill Hawks and as many of the heroes she feels are responsible for Twice's death as she possibly can. And to do that, she's using a vial of his blood to recreate his Sad Man's parade. There's no telling how that will end, but with a properly villainous mindset and a quirk of extraordinary power, Toga has become a truly frightening adversary. Her transformation complete, all that remains to be seen is how far she'll go before she's stopped. As always, I'm Otaku. Thank you all so much for watching and have an awesome day. I love you.